Right, that's enough of that intro music. And enough of waiting for Tom again. Apparently he's going to be joining us any second. He's been at work. We'll let him off.
Got deja vu with that intro.
Yeah,
waiting for Tom.
Yeah. We'd run the poll every week. 80% of people said he would be late. So there you go. There you go.
I just got to remember everything we talked about before we went live. We said a lot of stuff that should be said in the actual show.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come back up. Anyway, before we get into the show, let me just introduce everybody who's here. Before we get into the show, I just want to apologise to Matrey if he's listening. I know he'll listen back to this at some point. We'd recorded an interview about 2 weeks ago with Fiona, because Matrey can't make it at this time of night. In India it's like 3 a.m. or whatever, so he can't make the show. So we recorded an interview with Fiona, who's with us now, and we'll say hello in a second. But the audio recording that I took messed up, so it's my fault. So we've had to just scrap that and start again from scratch. But anyway, we've got Fiona with us. You say hello first.
Hiya.
Hello. Thanks for being live with us instead of recorded.
Anytime. Glad to be back.
We've got Xiangyu with us.
Hello, everybody.
World famous rapper, as people are saying in the chat.
Not world famous.
Nice. Harrison's with us.
Hello.
Back with us.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm back.
Tom should be with us at any point, so he's going to join in. Yes. Right. Anyway, the topic for tonight is the DPRK.
Guys, got to introduce our artist.
Oh yeah, our artsy Marxist painting with us. Let me get. It's because I've not got her up on the stream yet. That's why. Let me just get her onto the screen. There we go. Artsy's with us. What are you painting this week?
I'm painting Space Kim Jong-un, so this is going to be really fun. I got some glow-in-the-dark paint, so I'm going to be experimenting with that too, so we're going to see how that works.
Nice. Space Kim Jong-un. Nice.
We got to somehow manage to get it into Korea once they open up to tourists again.
You two have both got contacts there. Try and get the tour company to buy it for their office. Right?
Sure they'd love it.
Right, anyway, the topic for tonight is the DPRK, as you can see in the background. And that's because, why not? Let's talk about the DPRK. It doesn't get talked about enough. And when it does get talked about, it's talked about in the most ridiculous of ways, which I collected a few before we started. Kim killing his uncles and then they show up a week later. Cannibalism, all kinds of crazy stuff. People believing in unicorns, genes being banned, whatever. But the real facts are that, like, the US bombed them with like 500,000 tons of bombs and all kinds of disgusting stats. 75% of Pyongyang was destroyed, 2.5 million casualties of the Korean War, and 1.5 million of them being from the north. Bio warfare being used. Apparent nuclear arms being deployed. We're still finding out the real history of the Korean War, right? But those facts are why it gets lied about so much, right? Because they got to cover up these disgusting crimes of imperialism concerning the Korean War. And also, one thing that doesn't get said enough, which you can see on screen now. Here's a map of the north and the south. I know this is going to annoy you a little bit, Xiangyu, because the labels, but just ignore it for the example. So there you go. This is exactly the same as this, which is a map of occupied Palestine, which is exactly the same as this, which is occupied Northern Ireland, right? So there's no difference in these places, but they all seem to have, like, it's okay, isn't it, for liberals to be into free Palestine, but it's not okay for them to talk about the occupation of Northern Ireland or even consider that the US occupies the south of Korea, right? So I think we have to understand that they are examples of the same thing, which is imperialist occupation of another sovereign country, right? That's the brass, bottom fact of it. I just wanted to bring that up before we get into the show. Has anybody else got anything they want to add? And then we'll just take off the conversation from there. I think we should start, though, by discussing some of the most stupid sort of claims you've heard being claimed about the DPRK. Now, Harrison, I know you have made TikToks about this, so go on. You talk first.
Wait, let me get the TikTok up because I like to upload TikToks of kind of the most ridiculous propaganda against the DPRK because it really pisses off the Americans on there, which is always good fun. But yeah, I just made like a compilation. Oh yeah, there was that one. I'll just read the headline. Kim Bong-un, dopey dictator Kim Jong-un has turned North Korea into a nation of potheads, with 50p bags of cannabis to distract locals from their miserable lives. And I just uploaded that with this type of propaganda might actually get Americans to support them, which is actually true.
Very true.
Based on the comments, they were all saying, "Oh."
What I don't get about the whole using weed to distract people from the problems. I mean, if all the claims of everyone starving are true, then the last thing you will want is to give them the munchies. Wouldn't you agree?
And also, hold on. In the West, all the like stoners are the ones that are into all the causes and stuff. So you just end up with North Korea being full of hippies, and then obviously more activists. So it would do quite the opposite.
No, it's quite funny because when I was there, I actually asked this question that there's this rumor going around, sort of like a lot of Western sort of left circles that weed is like a massive thing in the DPRK and weed is like legal, and the tour guide, bless her, she just looked at me like, why would it be legal? Marijuana is a drug. Like it's the same as any other country. And it was just very interesting because it was she was also talking to us about sort of the effects of the opium wars and just like the opium trade in general and how it affected Korea, and how sort of like that's also one of the reasons why they have a very strict sort of zero tolerance policy for drugs there as well. But I think what she was saying that people do smoke is like hemp seeds, something to do with the hemp plant that I don't.
Basically,
really
they have
understand
hemp.
that.
It's grown around, and like weed that grows wildly, they'll smoke it. Like some people will, but there's not much of a stoner culture. It's not like it's basically cultivated to have like the highest THC levels.
Yeah.
But also, isn't it that hemp is used as a product, so it's a byproduct of growing hemp? Because again, like 90% of material in the West was made from hemp before industrial fabrics or materials were developed and stopped that. So is it a case of that? Do you know that, or is it just...
No, they do. They do grow it quite a lot because I think there is a problem because there's not actually that much arable land in the DPRK just due to its terrain. So they do make use of like literally every inch of land. So we'd go past so many sort of like farmlands and they'd point out to us that sort of like, if you can see, they don't like monoculture isn't just a thing over there because they can't afford to homogenize the land like that. So what they do is they literally grow sort of like your main plants, like your maize, your corns, your like wheats, in like the main bulk of the field, and then around the edges they'll grow things like hemp, they'll grow things like vegetables, other sort of like flowering plants, things like that. So every inch of space is used, and hemp is just quite easy to grow in the conditions they have over there, and they
versatile.
use it for like textiles. Yeah, exactly, because you can use it in textiles, medicines,
all
sorts of things.
Well,
Tobacco replacement, whatever.
Is like it grows like weed, doesn't it? Hence why it's got the name weed. So it's really, I just say versatile plant to grow.
There's another
some hemp at the market at Nason, and we smoked it with our tour guides.
Well, you shouldn't be saying that, Xiangyu. You're dispelling too much. You're dispelling too much. You're giving away too many secrets. I've heard that they believe unicorns are real.
Okay, so the unicorn thing, basically, it's kind of like how the Greek have Pegasus. Right?
Yeah. I thought it'd be something like that.
It's they have a mythical creature. It's kind of like the kirin in Japan, or the chirin in China. They call it the chorima, which is it's like the horse that the 1,000 li horse. Li is like a unit of distance, and it's a mythical creature that can travel basically the entire length of Korea in one day. So it's kind of like when they had like the Reconstruction era after the Korean War, they had like the Chollima movement, which is like we need to rebuild the country at the speed of the basically at the speed of Pegasus.
Exactly. And it's also worth noting that lots of people in the West believe in space shapes telling the future to them. So there you go.
Well, I think the thing with the Chollima thing as well, wasn't there a cave called like the Chollima Cave or something, and it was like an ancient kind of tourist site from thousands of years ago or something like that, and it was rediscovered, and like it made its way into Western media because it was like Kim Jong-un has discovered the Pegasus Cave or something, and then like they were making out that it was like he believed there were Pegasuses in there or something, and that obviously it was just the name of the cave was called Pegasus Cave or whatever, and this is why the rumor that they believe they have Pegasuses in that country is Pegasuses the plural of Pegasus?
Pegasi could be. One thing that this proves though is that these propaganda claims they're usually grounded or based on truth, right? And then they get completely twisted on their head. Now it's sometimes things where it's literally just a folklore, but you're claiming that everybody believes in it. You've twisted it that way. Or in the case of, I mean, imagine it happens with Korean as well, but it happens a lot with China stuff. It will be purposely mistranslated to mean something else rather than what it actually meant in the first place, right?
Yeah. Time out. You know the video that's playing right now?
Go on.
Who gave this video?
Oh, it was me. I've uploaded just a bunch of videos, so you'll see.
You know, that woman in the checkered shirt. She's I think she recently got married. But I think she was in a lot of I think
amazing.
She was in a lot of you know, Matt from YPT. He left YPT, but she was in a lot of his videos. And is she the potty mouth tour guide?
To be honest, no. She was actually she was very innocent, bless her. Actually, when we were there, they were talking about what's it called? They were talking about trouser shopping a lot. So that's sort of like just a term for like when you're going dating, when you're looking for sort of like a suitor or something. But no, she was so nice.
I think
she's
it was
from
her.
A very revolutionary family.
Yeah, I think it was her, but there was this one video. It might not have been her, but I think it's her. Matt, there was this video of her like playing around with Matt's voice recognition software on his phone, and she was just like, "Oh, fuck, shit ass." Like,
I would be surprised.
Yeah.
No, she wasn't. You get 100 years hard labor for swearing in English in the DPRK.
and you get Kim Jong-un's haircut as punishment too.
And don't forget the 5 generations of your family that also suffer the same punishment.
I mean, that's just such a ridiculous claim, because if so many people got arrested and it's all like 3 or 5 generations, then how are there any people left?
Yeah.
And how is there starvation and mass death but 5 generations of families existing?
And they're all apparently being catered for in these giant gulags. So I mean,
5 generations is like 200 years worth of family as well, right?
Well, the gulags, don't they eat like I remember reading one of Yeonmi Park's fucking Park Yeonmi's fucking little lies, and it was like she'd seen in some of these death camp gulags that like the children would eat mice, and then the mice would then eat the bodies of the children in some kind of like little cycle of
She left when she was 13. She's such a, you know what? She's done well for herself, hasn't she? She's made a career out of just flat out lying. That's all. She's spinning fantasies.
Notice how when she first left North Korea, she looked better fed than she does now. After living in America for such a long time.
Yeah. Well, that's patriarchy.
I suppose they don't have corn syrup in the DPRK, or at least not in every single foodstuff.
I mean,
there
were quite a lot of sweet stuff. They had a lot of mayonnaise, like a lot of different types of mayonnaise. I was very confused, but also, yeah, they did dabble a lot actually with European foods. I don't know about when you were there, Xiangyu, but most of the places we went to, they had some sort of like Western option, but it was more just sort of like a Korean imagination of European Western food. So it was it was really interesting actually. Yeah.
There was a picture that we shared only like last week that was taken in Ohio at a grocery store because of COVID and obviously supply chain issues. They'd put like paper covers over the shopping shelves to cover up the empty shelves in this shop, and we posted it like being like, oh yeah, this is the meme, right? Because we just waited, and then you got the comments from Americans like, this looks like North Korea. But it isn't, right? But it isn't. Exactly. It's in America. So like, what? you can like, what's the phrase? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right? You can put it right in front of their face, and they'll not see it. Now,
projection.
On that note, though, you know how a lot of these people, they're like kind of concern trolling and talking about how like the people in North Korea are suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes there is a tendency among supporters of the DPRK, like us, to just completely dismiss all of those things, and like there's some people who just act like, oh, everything there is like great and like it's awesome, but in reality, I mean, okay, yes, a lot of these things are grossly exaggerated. Some of it's just outright fabrications, but the people there do it is difficult to live there, especially like outside of like the nicer cities like Pyongyang, Hamhung, and whatever. But we need to ask why. Why is it? I mean, look at the sanctions. Look at the and then and people are like, oh well, sanctions only target the government. They don't do this and that. And then there are also some people who are like, oh, we should not give them food aid because if we give them food aid, it all goes to Kim Jong-un. And here's one thing that you know why the U.S. Still gives food aid to the DPRK?
Go on.
Because the thing about food aid is they're allowed to send people in to make sure that the food is not diverted to like places that they're not supposed to go to, which means you're allowed to send in people who get more access to like what's going on in the country than you would otherwise. That's why the U.S. likes giving food aid, because they get to have a better idea of what's on the ground. It's kind of like, it's part espionage. I mean, they're not allowed to go to like military bases, but they're allowed to go to more places where a lot of tourists tend to not go to.
Yeah, no, it's every source of aid that goes into DPRK, whether it's Red Cross, the US food aid, or whatever, there's always conditions attached. There's always strings attached. And the DPRK has historically, especially in the 90s, they were very against sort of like any sort of aid that had political conditions attached, which again led to them being lambasted by the press and saying, oh, you know, the DPRK government, they're blocking food from coming to the country, they're letting their people starve, they're doing XYZ, when in reality it was a form of protection. Like they weren't about to let themselves get colonized.
They don't want to be aid dependent.
Exactly. Like there's you know, it's just absolutely ridiculous that you force a country to essentially suffer from famines, mostly sort of like by way of natural disasters and the lack of arable land, but then you force them to take on all these conditions and pretend that you're doing them a service, when in actuality they don't need your help. The Korean people are a proud people. Like, you know, everyone, I'm sure Xiang, you can attest to this as well, but just everyone I spoke to whilst I was there, they were very proud of their revolution. They're very proud of their country, of Juche, of everything they have achieved under sanction and under blockade from the international community.
Which you would be, right? That's not a hard thing to understand. Like, it should be the default setting, right? You've just won a revolution. You're going to hate it.
What I really don't get, though, is how a lot of Westerners will rightfully talk about, like, you know, like abusive relationships and what abusers do. But then, like, when the U.S. does it, like, on a state level to, like, entire countries, like, out of imperialist interest, they just don't see the parallels.
There's one here, right? I mean, you raise a good point in saying that you have to look at why, right? And I think that also fits with the fact that these propaganda claims are often based in a truth, right? There's one here, human waste used as fertilizer. Now, they
do that in South Korea.
Yeah, but this is due to South Korea because it stopped sending fertilizers to them. So then everybody was asked to, like, you know, collect up their excrement to make fertilizer, because otherwise you're going to starve, right? You're going to do that instead of starving. But also, there's a documentary where they go to a collective farm, and in that farm, the farmer collects all his family's poop up, right? And then he uses it, he converts it into gas. He's got like a gas converter in his back garden. So he's like sustainable as well, creating his own fertilizer and power, off himself. But this is angled as like a bad thing for the Western propaganda. And then, like Xiangyu said, it's because of the South, the occupied area, that this happens in the first place. Who came in then?
I didn't say it's because of the South. But yes, that's part of it. But I was saying that even in the South, like on farmland, they maybe not in like, I bet even still, but like just a few decades ago, they were using shit as fertilizer, and in the South, and like in America, on a field trip, we visited a farm, and like they use manure for fertilizer.
But this would be
a similar thing. When
go on, Artsy.
Oh, to me that just sounds like a good idea. Like the way that like angled as a bad thing to repurpose like waste, when we just make pig manure here and repurpose that. So that's kind of weird for them to angle it like that. But I guess Americans are just so used to like being like living in a wasteful society where we just use everything once, put it underground, and forget about it. That they could still take that as a bad thing. To me, that sounds genius.
There's like health movements in the West. I don't know whether it's made its way to America. It probably actually originated in America, but I've heard of this in Britain, where people will purposefully drink their own piss as a way to they think it's like like some kind of nutrient drink. So like, if Westerners are drinking their own piss, why is that worse than the repurposement of human waste for arable farming and stuff? And as you say, we use animal waste for that purpose in the West anyway. What's the massive difference? It's just the animal that it's coming from, isn't it? Humans are animals. Is our waste so bad that it can't be? I don't know. I mean, it's just a ridiculous kind of thing to pick them up on, isn't it?
But then they'll bring up really ridiculous propaganda claims like, oh well, when Korea played Brazil in the World Cup, they made out that like DPRK won, right? And it was enforced that. Why do the people think that they're that fragile that they have to do this?
Exactly. Like it's another case of just dehumanizing.
I guess it's projection though, right? Because we've just seen the US do it over the Olympics. They kept tweaking the results as the Olympics was going on to put themselves at the top, didn't they? So.
No, I mean, speaking of the Olympics, just the way they've been talking about the DPRK being like, oh, the DPRK hasn't sent a delegation to the Olympics. Look at how oppressive they are. Oh, look who hasn't showed up. It's just like the DPRK hasn't had a single case of COVID. You want them to risk all of the athletes. You want them to risk the entire country who's under sanction, who don't get enough medicines as it is, to send them to an Olympics where you're sending US athletes who actually refuse to get vaccinated. Like, what? Sorry, what sense? Where is the sense in that? Why? Who would be that murderous to willingly want that to happen to your people? Like, I'm sorry, but the DPRK has bigger priorities than sustaining the Olympics, which is a very sort of like, it's in some ways it's very archaic sort of sports traditions in itself, with so many horrendous rules, like with everything going on with intersex athletes and specifically African American women who have been targeted by the rules of the International Olympic Committee. But again, it's the DPRK that's the bad one for just not turning up, because we're still living through a global pandemic.
And also, hold on, before we change the Xiangyu, Britain are threatening to not send delegations to the Beijing Olympics for political reasons. Go on, Xiangyu.
Yeah. No, I was just about to say it's for political reasons, and it is a boycott. But like, one of them is just, it's like a political move, and the other is just, hey, our country's infrastructure is not great. We have like shortages, we have issues, and like if COVID were to become a big issue in Korea, at least the northern part of Korea, then our medical system might be overloaded and it might be a disaster. So we're just gonna play it safe. I mean, they're very different. Like,
Exactly.
who does it help when Britain decides to not send a delegation to Beijing because they don't like the CPC? Who does it help? Does it help the British people? No, it doesn't help anyone.
Doesn't help the athletes, doesn't help anyone, and also who gives a fuck? Like, as if China's gonna be like, oh no Brits are turning up.
The bastards that stole Hong Kong off us aren't gonna come and fucking
Oh no!
off
Yeah.
us from the Olympics.
Oh,
What a shame! What an absolute crying shame that'd be.
Here's
What I wanted to say about how a lot of the propaganda is based on some truth, though, since we were on the topic of like
Go
everything
on.
we were saying before is kind of like with that theme. I think one thing that a lot of people, especially liberals and like liberals of like the fake left kind variety and like the conservative type and everything in between, they like to point out individual freedoms in Korea as like a gotcha. And so I think sometimes a lot of times supporters of the DPRK, their gut instinct is to just say, oh, they're a lot more free than we are in America, and it depends on what. They're free in the sense that they have their sovereignty, which is a lot more that can be said for most countries in the world under with you know under the imperialist order. However, they are a very sanctioned country and resources are scarce. Now, all else equal, if you let's just look in America, for example. Have you ever just looked at like a very poor family versus a very rich family?
In America, of course.
Yes, the
yeah.
poor families tend to be more authoritarian. Like, I use this word loosely, by necessity. Let's say like if you're from a very poor family, right, and then like you graduate from high school, you might have to just go like get a job that you don't like and support your family. Whereas if you're rich, you know, your parents give you money and then you get to go backpack through Europe and maybe start your own business and do whatever it is you want. Now, objectively, is the rich family is a child of the rich family more free?
Well, yeah, this is the point, isn't it? Well, no, they're not more free. Well, yeah, the child of the rich family is. This is like comparing Jake Paul to a single mum who has to work two jobs, right?
So I think
in terms of what you talk, that's what you mean when you talk about authoritarianism, right? You mean actual freedom to just do whatever the hell you want, opposed to having to have a rigid work schedule. Right.
So, I mean, you look at Korea, okay, I think a more fair comparison, if you want to compare the different systems, is to compare it to a capitalist country of a similar level of economic development. And in those countries, you tend to have like drug cartels just like terrorizing communities and all that stuff. Where like, why do people from, say, countries like Honduras after the 2009 coup, like, why do they keep on escaping and trying to make their way into America? Is it because they love America? No, it's because like life over there has become so difficult with all the political instability. What Korea is trying to do is first and foremost, it's trying to maintain a certain level of political stability so people can at least get by and live with a certain amount of dignity. You know, I think this is a thing that's missed because a lot of people in the imperial core and in first world countries just take all of this stuff for granted. The bottom line for any country, any state, whether it is capitalist or feudalist or socialist, is it's not going to allow itself to be overthrown. And the threat of the DPRK being overthrown is very great. It's surrounded by hostile forces. It's half of the country, so South Korea, is under U.S. occupation. The Korean War hasn't ended. The U.S. refuses to sign a peace treaty with the DPRK, and a lot of people don't know this, but I mean, Bush ran first strike simulations on North Korea around the time the U.S. invaded Iraq. So why do they feel the need to divert a lot of their resources to building up a strong military and then later build nukes, and develop missiles, ICBMs that are capable of carrying them to the U.S.? It's because they need to survive. They can't be they don't want to be overthrown by hostile forces. I mean, you look at
that thing. Hold on,
Libya.
that key fact, right, is what saved, quote unquote, saved the USSR existing when they turned around and went, haha, we've got a nuclear bomb too. And China's the same. When they developed nuclear weapons is what secured China's sovereignty. And that's because you have to do that in the face of an imperialist who has also got nuclear bombs and also is prepared to use them, right? They're the only people who've used them is the East India Company, right?
No, exactly. And even the DPRK, it has a very strict no strike first policy. Like it will never, and they're very open, but they will never strike first with their nuclear weapons. But if they have to use them, they will use them to protect their country. There's no ifs and buts about it. But it's just very telling that, you know, the US has literally I don't know how many hundreds or even thousands of sort of like nuclear missiles sort of dotted
Thousands.
all across the continent, thousands. But no one bats an eyelid. The DPRK has barely one, made from its own sort of resources, with no sort of funding by Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or any of these private arms dealers. But somehow the DPRK is the villain in all of this. The DPRK, who's Pyongyang, I think it was something like there were 18 bombs per square kilometer of Pyongyang during the Korean War, and we're saying that, you know, Pyongyang is the problem. The DPRK is the problem in all of this.
I mean, it's the same with China. They've got the same policy with regards to no first use, and Russia has a policy which is, they say that they will use them in the event of invasion from the West. So all of these countries have no first use policies. There's only one country in the world that owns nuclear weapons that openly says it will use them first, and there's no prizes for guessing.
Is it the country that's used them first before?
It's the country that's used them first. Yeah, they literally have a nuclear first strike policy, and it's the only nation in the world that does. Even Britain doesn't have an overt nuclear first strike policy. That's up to the Prime Minister at the time, who provides a written letter to the Trident submarines, and that letter, no one knows what it says. It contains the Prime Minister's personal opinions on how the weapon should be used in a potential conflict, all this. But America literally openly says, yeah, we will use our weapons first. So why are other people shocked when other nations build up their nuclear arsenals, when they are literally being threatened with nuclear holocaust and genocide from the United States?
And here's a stat for you. The New York police budget is like, what, 4 times the amount of North Korea's military spending or something like that. There's some crazy stat, isn't there?
Also, while we're on the topic, you know, the US president, what does he travel around with? The nuclear football.
Oh god, yeah, I forgot that was it. It just sounds so cartoon villainish, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Explain what this is for anybody who doesn't know.
It's like a little duffel bag with this little computer inside with the nuclear launch code. So like anywhere the president goes, he can just launch nukes.
Yeah,
So,
there's like a big. Sorry.
You've got to be quite what's the word, lacking in the trouser department to have to walk around with a device that can end all humanity, right?
Yeah,
just sad.
Disgusting.
Just sad.
And who nuclearized the Korean peninsula?
Let me guess. Is it the country that used nuclear weapons before?
Yes. Part of the so the armistice that was signed in 1953 stated that like no party can like outside party, something along the lines of this can like introduce like more advanced weapons into the peninsula that will like escalate war. So basically nukes, but the U.S. started stationing nukes in South Korea, and then but the thing is, they'll say, oh, South Korea doesn't have nukes because they're not under like this puppet regime's control. And nowadays they removed the actual nukes away from the peninsula to like aircraft carriers and whatever, but they can be rebuilt at any time within short notice. So for all intents and purposes, Pyongyang is still under nuclear threat from the U.S. with missiles. With nukes essentially like still in Korea.
Yeah, no, because that's what the architecture.
Hold on.
A lot of sorry, yeah.
Sammy has just asked in the chat, doesn't the UK have a first strike policy? I don't believe they do. I think the UK is a bit loose about it, and I think they say like, we'll use nukes if we're attacked by weapons of mass destruction, which could be anything really, couldn't it? It could just be doesn't have to be nuclear. But they're not like the US that could just literally go, right, we're going to nuke you. Go on, Tom.
There was a case with when the whole Skripal poisonings happened in the UK, which is widely presumed by Russians to be a false flag from the Porton chemical weapons factory in Britain. But we'll not get into that side of things. A lot of British MPs, like the more war hawkish ones, like Tom Tugendhat, Benedict, what's his name? all these like warhawk MPs in the Conservative Party mostly were saying that this was a weapons of mass destruction attack on the UK by Russia. And that is, as you say, it's kind of like,
well, that's the language, isn't it?
Nuclear war. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
If they can describe that as enough for nuclear war, they kind of do have a strike first policy, right?
Yeah, same. It was the same in Iraq, and they said if Iraq used weapons of mass destruction in the field in that war, then the UK would have used nuclear weapons against rogue states, in quotation marks is what they call it.
Very loose, but I do believe also the UK has some like weird thing where the Prime Minister can override all that. And
it's the letter basically, because we only have the Trident submarines as our only delivery method. We don't have a nuclear triad like China, Russia, or the USA. So basically, the Prime Minister at the time gives a letter to the commander of all of the Trident nuclear submarines, and this letter stays sealed in the hull of the submarines. And basically on it, within the letter is the Prime Minister's commands at the time, and it's one of three options. It's either you retaliate with nuclear weapons. That's one option. It's either retaliate with nuclear weapons, return to home base, and if the home base has been destroyed by nuclear weapons, then they are to return to any friendly nation. Or the third option is for the submarine commander to make his own decision at the time. So they're the three options that are given to every submarine commander of the Trident nuclear force by the sitting Prime Minister at the time. And essentially, if nuclear war hasn't broken out in the time of that Prime Minister's prime ministerial stay in office, the letter is destroyed without being opened. So you never know what the wishes would be. Essentially, that's how it works.
Wow, sounds like some sort of Harry Potter plot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting how it's all almost like a video game for these people. Like
exactly.
even down to sort of like military training is literally based on video games. When the US military, that's why video games have proliferated so much over the years. But then you contrast it with, say, the DPRK, and you see how real the threat of it is in daily life. Because we were, whilst I was there, I just was asking about, about the drafting into the military, which is like no longer a thing, so you no longer get automatically drafted after high school. But what all citizens, so men and women, so everyone in the country undergoes is, I think it's sort of like once a year or once every few years, you have a week of training in sort of like in self-defense and military defense, which just basically means that it's a means of making sure that everyone is prepared for battle at any time. And when I say battle, I literally mean occupation, invasion by the US or any of its allies. So people will practice by carrying sort of like wooden guns, so like fake guns obviously, to work, or carrying some sort of armor or weapon with them, just to sort of like get them used to the feel of carrying these things around. And like some people say, oh, this is very paranoid behavior. But again, if you look at the history of the DPRK, if you look at the history of bombing, the use of napalm, of chemical weapons, biological weapons, all the like, it's really no surprise that generations on, the threat of invasion, especially since the Korean War hasn't ended, is still there. It's an everyday reality for them. These are the people that genuinely have every right to be worried of nuclear attack, not all these imperialist countries who know they will very likely never be touched by the nuclear missiles of China or the DPRK, because they don't have a no strike first policy. Again, it's just a huge juxtaposition.
Is it the fact that the DPRK and these countries have mandatory military service because their militaries are used in a different way as well? Like you see in China, the PLA do a lot of work in terms of like when a dam leaks or something, they go and plug it up, or when whatever, they're sort of like the infrastructure, they keep things held together, right? So is it not the fact that the US literally flattened the North, they flattened it with bombs, and the fact that everything needs rebuilding, right? This is the authoritarianism again, that quote unquote, that Xiangyu was talking about, that you join the military because the military is the people who are building these infrastructure projects. It's not the fact that they're joining the military to get them to become mindless imperialist thugs that are going to go and occupy somewhere else. When have you seen a DPRK troop outside of the DPRK, apart from like military games and such? You know, ever? Escher just said something once off the cusp that really like hits home with this propaganda, and it was to do with the Cold War. And she said it's always the Russians, right? But then you would never see a Russian. And it's the same, isn't it, with DPRK? It's all DPRK, this evil country that's going to nuke Washington. But when has the DPRK ever made a threat to nuke Washington? It hasn't, right? If you go and look at they've got a no strike first policy. So
they've made warnings, stern warnings, like saying if the U.S. does this, then we will retaliate. But then, like, it's always twisted. Like, they never talk about the initial aggression from the U.S. They just take bits and pieces to make it seem like the DPRK just one day woke up and decided they're gonna go nuke Washington, or like send missiles flying across the DMZ.
No, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I
mean, it's not going to be like the story of Red Dawn. Like, this is what I'm talking about. When this world only exists inside the minds of a Westerner who believes this tripe, right? The film Red Dawn has literally been rehashed, hasn't it? In the 1980s, it was the USSR that invaded the small town, and the individualistic American teens formed a militia and stole their dad's guns and defeated the whole USSR and saved the day.
They could only defeat the USSR by through collectivism.
yeah, but we're still individual libertarians, right? But anyway, this film got
People's War.
The film got remade again, didn't it?
Yeah.
And China was the enemy, but then the US was like, actually, we want some of that China money, so they just redid it as they just CGI DPRK flags over the top of it. But either or enemy, when have they ever stepped foot on American soil? Exactly. Ever?
Never.
Yeah.
Also, the military thing. I mean, it's siege socialism, and they needed a deterrent. So, military service, I believe, used to be 10 years for men, but now it's been reduced. And I think the good thing about the DPRK having nukes is they can start since they have more of a security guarantee. I mean, before they had nukes, but they didn't have any ICBMs that could strike anywhere on the U.S. continental U.S. So now they have the deterrent, so then they can start focusing more on other things. And like you said, soldiers, like a lot of times you see apartment buildings being constructed. It's all just conscripted soldiers. Like basically, if you're There's a lot of soldiers. It's like social construction. That's like a lot of it's just like building things.
Yeah.
A couple of the South Korean guys I lived with in Shanghai, my roommates, two of them were from South Korea. One had done his military service already, and the other one had come to China specifically to avoid doing his military service. This was South Koreans. Now you never ever hear about South Korean military service in the West, do you? It's always just evil DPRK and their million-man army and stuff. But I believe every male in the south of Korea has to do a thing. Is it 2 years service?
I think it's 3 for certain things or two for others. It's 3 years if you're doing alternate service, because like administrative stuff.
And what do you do in that, right? You go and take part in war games, right, on the coast of the north with the US, practicing invasions and stuff.
That's some of it. The others, I mean, I have a classmate who was stationed in Seoul, so I doubt that he was really doing much war games. Along the DMZ. But another thing you don't know is a lot of people don't know is the DMZ is is 2 miles wide or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of people think the U.S. soldiers and the South Korean soldiers just stay no, they actually go inside the DMZ and go all the way up to the demarcation line. That's why sometimes casualties happen, because if either side kind of just crosses the demarcation line a little bit, the other side might shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Or there's landmines there, right?
Yeah, but usually if you're going in to do drills, they kind of know which parts don't have landmines, so you don't really step on them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the guys I lived with, he was stationed on the DMZ for the majority of his military service, and he used to like wake up screaming and stuff in the middle of the night. He was only about 22, I think 22 or 23,
Oh gosh.
when I knew him, and like he was this absolutely huge buff Korean dude, like 6 foot tall, you know, big ladies man. Everyone loved him. Really handsome, and he'd wake up screaming at 4 a.m. with PTSD. So I don't know what had happened to him because he never spoke about it, but like, and that was the South Korean army that
Yeah.
he was conscripted into. So I mean, this is something that Westerners just do not know. They just presume that South Korea is like,
Happy land.
this happy land where everything is, everyone works at Samsung or whatever.
Everybody's a K-pop
Yeah.
idol.
On this topic, mainland China has its army is totally volunteer. You're not conscripted. You don't have to like do military service.
Well, you do for college, right? But it's only like
That
like 2 weeks basic service on how to like
Yeah,
fold your
so
clothes
it's not
and
really,
stuff.
it's not conscription.
Yeah,
It's just
it's
training.
not really.
It's
just a bit
it's
of
very
training.
basic training. But
So it's like what they do in the DPRK.
But in Taiwan, it's like 2 years. It's it used to be 2 years. Now it's 1 year. Before they reduced it to 4 months. But Taiwan has like compulsory military service.
But then you'll get boomers in the West who will go, we should bring back national service, right?
Yeah.
So you want national service.
It's a double-edged sword.
But
It's
when
a double-edged sword because a lot of the reason why there were anti-war activists during Vietnam was because of the draft.
Mhm.
But now with the way that it's done now in America, there's 2 types of people who join. One are like the poor who are manipulated by recruiters into joining, and others are just kind of U.S. chauvinists.
Sociopaths.
yeah.
Sociopaths.
Yeah. These are the 2 types of people who join. So you're not gonna get too much of a the anti-war movement arguably is a little bit weaker now because of you have less other types of
Dissident.
people in the army. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a big reason they took the national service away and after was it straight after Vietnam or was it was shortly after Vietnam, wasn't it? The US, I mean, was because obviously a lot of the US soldiers were like fragging their officers and stuff towards the end and like just committing general acts of rebellion and things like that. And obviously you get that less when it's a totally volunteer-based force like China, like the USA, like Russia's volunteer as well. So yeah, you've got a more what's the word?
Loyal.
Malleable.
Loyal force, yeah, because it's generally tends to be people that want to join, not so much in the USA, as you say, Xiangyu. It's a lot of people that have no other choice and join for like medical care and to pay for college.
Well,
and
they
stuff like
they target sort of poor people though as well, don't they?
They'll get recruiters to drive
yeah.
nice sports cars to like very impoverished areas and like
They do the same in
wearing,
Britain.
wearing like a lot of bling and stuff just to like impress the
Yeah. But I mean, even
impressionable poor kids to join and say, hey, this is the life you could live if you just serve Empire for.
Come on, Fiona.
But even so, middle class. The majority of the U.S. Army is primarily composed of middle class.
Yeah.
Quote unquote middle class. Like the whole thing that only poor people join the army is a complete myth.
I'm saying those people do exist and are preyed upon by recruiters.
Of course, yeah.
Artsy, were you going to say
For
something?
sure.
The military. Yeah, they definitely target people and they just lie to you. They try to get you to sign when you're 17 so that you don't really know what you're doing at that point. And what they tell you is that you're just going to be doing administrative work and you can get out in like 2 or 3 years or something, and then all your college will be paid for. And most kids are aware already of the debt that they're going to go into if they want a degree, which they're told they'll need in order to get a job. So they just really prey upon that. And that's, when you're 17, you haven't had any time usually to figure out what's going on. All you've been through is the United States education system, which is completely, complete indoctrination. So not excusing it by any means. I ended up taking the test and then deciding there's no way I'd be willing to do that. And I figured out they were lying to me about not being deployed and stuff. But a lot of people I knew didn't figure that out in time. And, even if you figure it out a year or 2 later, you're not able to get out of the military. It's almost impossible. So
You have to pay your way out, right?
It's longer than that. You have to go through like a court process. They won't get out until a separation date. So you literally, like, if they'll stamp you with, I forget what the label is, but it makes it almost impossible to get a job if you drop out of the military. So they also make it impossible for you to leave. So it's really kind of deeper than most people realize, the level of like indoctrination and like bondage you're in. But it's still not an excuse by any means, because it's terrible, and people should know better. But you know.
Well, it flies in the face of considering it voluntary, right? It's only voluntary at one point, and it's only because a lot of the time these people have been brainwashed into thinking that's the right thing to do. Go on.
There was a guy I knew in secondary school, and he got into the Sandridge Officers College. Now, for anyone who's not British or doesn't know what that is, essentially it's like a fast-track training course so that you become a British officer in the army, rather than going into the army as kind of like quote-unquote cannon fodder. And he signed up because they told him that they'd give him £3,000 a year while he was studying at university, and they'd give him, and he basically signed up when he was 17. That's when I knew him, and he was getting given £1,000 when he was 17, £1,000 when he was 18, and then every year that he was at university, which he had to study a war-related degree. Now, he wanted to study history, so he was happy with that, and they offered to pay his entire degree cost plus £3,000 bursary a year, so giving him free money essentially. And he got to the end of this scheme and realized that he'd signed away 10 years of his life as a British officer in the army. He only realized he'd done that kind of like halfway through university. He was a really clever lad. So what he did was he just got himself a TEFL qualification, teach English as a foreign language, and he now just lives in Vietnam as a kind of like defector. So yeah, he's
fair enough, to be honest.
Yeah, good lad. Good on him.
Yeah, and I know I can definitely say that that's true. I know a soldier who was lied to about salary, and they basically pay like poverty wages to some of them. I know that for sure. And I know they lied to me about how much I would make too, and I ended up figuring that out. So it's literally just like straight up lies. They just come in and lie to like teenagers. You know?
They have like a video. They have like a video game they take around American schools, apparently. I've heard this. They've got like a US Army video game, and they rock up, and I mean, as if Call of Duty and such isn't a US Army game already, but they have like an official one that they take around school and give kids a play on. But it's just indoctrination, isn't it? To then assume that it's an important subject to talk about, right? Because these are the things that they're claiming the DPRK does, but they just don't. They're not doing that. Like Xiangyu said, you join the military and you're more likely going to be just like building tower blocks or building a bridge over a river or going to help with harvest or just whatever the state needs, just like a force here, now, there, we've got to get this stuff done because, you know, we're under sanction, etc., etc. Life's just different, isn't it? And just because it's different doesn't mean that it's authoritarian, quote unquote. You can't make these assumptions without looking at context and context, the bigger picture, your own situation. People do this to try and they'll go, oh, that's just whataboutism. It's not whataboutism. We all live on the same planet, right? You can't hold one country to a standard that you don't even hold your own country to. That's the point.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things like sorry, go on.
Like to bring an earlier to mention an earlier example, it's kind of like how in the poor family, like when the kid turns 18, they might be obligated to go like work at a factory or whatever to support the family, whereas like the rich family's kid gets to like go backpacking across Europe,
or be Jake Paul or whatever, and just fuck about with Lamborghinis and whatever. That's the difference, isn't it? And
I mean, I would like North Koreans to be able to do like all of these things that these rich kids get to do, like, you know, travel the world and be like be more open with the rest of the world. But that's you need certain conditions. You need first of all they need some reassurances of their sovereignty and their stability and their safety and plus like you want to do these things. It also means the sanctions need to be lifted so they can reach a certain standard of living. that enables, that allows for that stuff. So it's not just like a few ultra privileged people who get to do that.
Exactly. Passports are expensive in the DPRK. Travel is expensive. I mean, travel in the country is like cheap as chips, but a plane, like, you know, just to get a plane ticket to another country, it's a lot of money. Like the average DPRK citizen couldn't do that. But funnily enough, I did have a friend who went to France a few years ago, and they actually did meet some backpackers from the DPRK who, like, I don't know, they just were on holiday in France in a hostel. So I mean, if people there have the means, they can afford certain privileges, but that's not to say that the majority of the population can do that, which is why all the rumors of DPRK citizens can't leave, they can't do this, they can't do that, it's simply not true. They could, but can they afford to is the other question. Like, is it worth it? Like, why? Like, it's just not a priority. And I mean, even with the with sort of like there was that travel ban from the US, so US citizens can't go and visit the DPRK anymore. That wasn't a move done by the DPRK, that was purely on the US side. I mean, similar with sort of like, yeah, exactly. And why, what's it called, Koreans in the south aren't able to visit the DPRK. Again, it is because the country is still at war. So again, there's so many restrictions, authoritarian restrictions, the media will tell you about, but they won't give the context behind it. They won't explain that, you know, like, yeah, sure, there's a lot of the food, maybe perhaps the food isn't as varied as it is in other countries in the world, and that's because there isn't,
it's not been industrialized.
It hasn't been industrial. They're growing, like, they're being very self-sufficient. Like, their whole policy ideology of Juche is literally to self-sustain, and that means they have to focus on a certain number of foods. So it is a lot of kimchi, it is a lot of rice, it is a lot of just sort of like leafy greens that can be grown easily on the edges of farmlands. And that's just the reality of the situation. Like, they don't import from all other countries in the world. They couldn't, even if they wanted to, because they're not allowed. The only country that will willingly openly trade with them is China, and even that, a lot of it has to be done in secret because sanctions.
Also, brain drain is a serious issue in all developing countries.
Yeah, 100%.
And so it's kind of, you can kind of understand why they wouldn't want, they want their scientists to go back home, and they kind of have certain restrictions. But I mean, once countries reach a certain level of development, these restrictions are lifted. I mean, a lot of times Westerners will love to bring up Taiwan and how it's like a beacon of democracy. Well, it was like, it's the longest martial law under the rule of Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo, and then before in the 90s, when like it became totally liberalized at the behest of the U.S. imperialists. But what people don't know is until the Jiang Jingguo era, so Chiang Kai-shek is the dad, Jiang Jingguo is his son, who took over leadership after the older Chiang died. It wasn't until like around the time of his leadership that people in Taiwan were allowed to leave and like travel abroad.
Your episode with Escher on that is amazing, by the way.
Oh really? I haven't listened to it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
We'll have to give it a listen.
A good point on this that you were talking about there, Fiona, is we had Mambion from Cuba ages ago, and one of the things he said was they would always say that like Cuba is this secretive place where nobody gets information for the outside world, and then at the same time, the reason for that is because the US refused to lay the phone lines, the physical cables for the internet, so Cuba's cut off from the world. It's not the fact that they don't say, and it's the same for Korea, isn't it, when they're talking about 100%. Korea has its own internet. Because the West refuses to allow Korea to connect to the world. So what else do you want them to do? Just not have an internet at all? And sit there and...
No, part of it is also their own censorship, admittedly. They're rightfully paranoid about like NED activities.
Well, of course. That's not paranoia though. That's just being safe.
It's just the truth. And I mean, even the stuff with like the internet cables and things like that, like there's actually sanctions on a lot of minerals and materials coming into the country under the guise of, oh, they're going to build a nuclear weapon with it. It's like saying, oh, you don't want this country to make cake, so you're not going to give them any sugar in case they make a cake. Like, it's just, it's completely ridiculous. And it does mean that a lot of the internet services, they rely on them from China. So, you know, they are a privileged few who do get to access the internet, depending on what jobs they do. But for all intents and purposes, as you were both saying, they have their own intranet. They can download apps. They just have to physically go to a store to download them. Whatever, like they have their own ways of distributing and communicating information. And for the most part, they know quite a lot about the outside world because they also have TV, and the TV does tend to be a good source of knowledge because they do play sort of like a lot of non-Korean movies, and they'll report on, like, they'll show non-Korean documentaries with, like, obviously Korean dubbed and things like that. Like, they have just as much access to information as we do, probably just not the same speed and not the same sort of like overload of information within the same amount of time. Because even the stuff to do with Palestine, Israel, just world events, you'll see like in their newspapers, which they publish online, like they are very up to date with all world news.
Go on, Tom.
I mean, as Xiangyu was saying before, I mean, it's the censorship it makes sense in a lot of cases. I mean, the reason obviously China still has the Great Firewall, the Golden Shield project up, is because, I mean, if you go on Reddit nowadays, you can find like every single post on there will have like some form of racism in it towards Asians or Chinese people in particular. There's so much misinformation and racial hatred out there. Why would you want your citizens to be seeing this nonsense? Take away the NED's bullshit, which obviously is a major aspect. But I mean, the Western internet is so filled with chauvinistic racism. I mean, Twitter, I mean, obviously is like kind of a battleground for us all, isn't it? I mean, every single day we're all arguing with these kind of idiots on there and trying to educate them even when they refuse to be educated, or even when they're lost causes kind of thing. Like it kind of makes sense if there was that much kind of racial hatred towards the United States present on all of these kind of forms of social media. I'm sure the USA would have them shut down as fast as physically possible, or create their own kind of firewall project.
It's what they're already doing. I mean, with Twitter, they have that weird fact-check thing with Associated Press and Reuters, where essentially they've teamed up with them to fact-check information on Twitter. And Facebook as well, it has its own fact-checking service. And like, who are they in the service of? It's not the working class people. It's not the proletariat. It's not sort of like socialists and communists. It's, you know, it's a lot of conspiracy theories. It's stuff that's backing Biden and Democrats. It's things that uphold the imperialist war machine. So even the internet that we have now, it's very, very much censored, just in a very different way. And it's owned by the Murdoch empire. So I mean, is even the press, the internet, is it even free in the West, or have we just
But then at the
same
time, right?
By algorithms.
Yes.
And at the same time,
exactly.
Westerners will say to Chinese people who are using Twitter, "What are you doing on Twitter? Like, what do you want them to be on Twitter, or don't you want them to be on Twitter? Which one's it?"
Go back to the other side of the firewall.
Yeah, go back there. Right, I wanted to show this picture because this picture here is a good reason why they have to do so much propaganda against socialism. This is the power of socialism, and this is what Xiangyu was talking about when he said, "I want everybody to be rich in Korea." It's not that you want everybody to be billionaires, right? It's you want everybody to live like a billionaire, right? And this is an example of that.
Comfortably.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is an example of it. Here we go. Look, China figures out a process to farm caviar, thus saving wild sturgeon from extinction. Well, that's a win on its own. And it also makes the delicacy widely affordable to the masses. And here's the capitalist press on it. After China turned it into a cheap snack, caviar is at risk of losing its status as a luxury good.
Such garbage.
I want Rolex to lose its status as a luxury good. So
Exactly.
So I can get them.
Exactly. I think Deng Xiaoping said famously, "Lamborghinis for all."
Okay, admittedly, like the car culture in the West is pretty bad, but that has more to do not with consumer choices, but with the way cities are planned.
And lack of public transport as well. I mean, like if you compare China and the USA are roughly the same sized countries in terms of land area, but if you look at the amount of like public transport capacity China has in comparison to the USA, it's like it's not even worlds apart. It's like universes apart. I mean, you can get anywhere in Shanghai in like an hour maximum. Takes you like an hour to get from one side of the city to the other. That includes waiting times for the subways. You know, outside every subway station, there's like kind of extremely cheap rentable bikes. And this is just Shanghai. I mean, like, you know, Beijing the same. Pretty much every large tier 1 city is completely, you know, the infrastructure is completely constructed for mass public transport in China. Whereas in the USA, there just isn't any.
The way to overcome climate change and all of these issues is through innovation, and it's not degrowth. Like, you know, you have a lot of these like hippies in the West who are like the Baizuo, who are just like, oh man, we've gone too far. Now we just need degrowth and just need to go back to it's like primitivism. Yeah, but the only way you can actually overcome these issues is to first of all like move away from fossil fuels, and you need innovation. You need scientists for that. I don't know how this stuff's gonna work in the future, but you need it's kind of like in the past humans were at humans got too good at farming and all that stuff, and there was hunting and gathering, and there was a problem with like sustainability until they started figuring out how to like domesticate animals and do farming and all that stuff. So it's just it's all about progress and innovation and figuring out new ways. But you have these people who are just pushing for degrowth, and like they're just like, oh, we need to just their idea of leftism. Like if you tried to push this in a place like Korea and North Korea, they'll be like, what the fuck? It's like you're telling us that we shouldn't have niceties like, you know, hot water and better access cars and whatever. Like, hell no, it's
kind of ridiculous, really, because even with the DPRK, like a lot of the reason why they've invested so much into Kim Jong-un sort of big sort of focus in this decade has been science and technology, because science and technology is like a source of liberation and empowerment, especially in terms of like Juche. So for example, I was saying
it's
earlier,
called the Industrial Revolution, right? Revolution. And I was talking about how they're trying to make ways of growing food in every possible way. So one of the new technologies they're trying to do is to increase the yield of rice they're making. So they've invented sort of like hydroponic systems within the city, so they can grow rice in water just in the streets of Pyongyang. And they've got like loads of like innovations like that, where even sort of like solar panels, like most families in the DPRK will have solar panels, not necessarily because of, you know, they want to be a source of renewable energy for the world or whatever, but because the electricity grid is under so much pressure. They do have rolling blackouts. You know, electricity is limited, very limited in Pyongyang, and sort of like even in rural areas and things as well. So in order to bypass that, in order to bypass that, you have solar panels which can power the fridge and the lights, so they don't have to rely on the electricity grid. Whereas things like the TV, heating, all that sort of stuff, it will be powered by the main grid, but you don't need to use it all the time, so it's fine. But as for the fridge, you need to keep your food cool the whole time, so you know you have sources of renewable energy. And you'll find this throughout sort of like the country, where renewable sources of energy are actually sort of like ways of self-sufficiency. And it might not be the ideal way, but it just helps to lift the standards and quality of living. And as Xiangyu said, that's why this whole thing of degrowth, like, no, Korea shouldn't have to suffer from rolling blackouts. They shouldn't have to have so much stress on the electricity grid because they can't get in the raw materials to be able to power their cities.
They need stable electricity grids.
Exactly.
But the thing about the sanctions, one thing that it's really odd how Western environmentalists never like compliment the DPRK for their accomplishments, because because due to sanctions, a lot of times they're forced by circumstance to look for green alternatives, and you know, the building I stayed in, when I went to Pyongyang, all of the hotels were full because it was the week of National Day, and there were so many tourists from all over the world. So instead of staying at a regular hotel, we're at the SciTech complex, that the building shaped like an atom. Next to that building is the living quarter for visiting scientists. Basically, it's a hotel for scientists from visiting from other countries and other parts of Korea. We ended up staying there, and that whole entire building is powered by green energy. It's geothermal and solar.
Yes, there's a
that's
swimming. There's
incredible.
a water park that's in one of the documentaries about the DPRK, and that's powered by hydroelectricity as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not geothermal. It's like it's
Geothermal.
incredible what they've been able to do on such limited resources. And like, to be honest, the thing is, it shouldn't have to be this way. Like, it's incredible that they have, but this isn't ideal, you know? Like, it's not done out of a place of pure innovation. It is done out of a place of, you know, we don't have any other choice. And if they did, I'm
America
sure they
bombed
would.
like 75% of our country.
But look at what they are able to accomplish with these sanctions. Now, if you lift the sanctions, it's an economic miracle just waiting to happen.
But then then the Western media,
do it.
right? Hold on. The Western media has this very strange fetish where they will if you see it sometimes, don't you? They will be like, look at this African. He invented his own credit card machine. Isn't he cute? Like, and he's made it out of bits. But that'll be thrust to the front of the Western media as this like nice story to show off. But then, like Xiangyu said, you're not looking at the achievements the DPRK's made because of socialism, right? And then you're lauding a poor African kid who's had to make something from his community out of scratch because of Western imperialism in Africa, right? And now
The pillaging
Both
of resources.
socialists, both socialists and capitalists realize the economic potential of Korea. They know that Korea is rich in resources and they're sitting on trillions of minerals. But the thing is, socialists want communists want the lifting of sanctions, and they want the resources to be exploited in a way such that it enriches the lives of the Korean people. Whereas what imperialists have in mind is they want to extract everything, and they want to leave the people like just living in poverty. I mean,
They don't give a shit,
South Korea was allowed to develop through and get rich through a right-wing Bonapartist regime that kind of looked out for the people. And in a certain, it's like, you know, Bonapartist. It's not like totally neoliberal. It's still an illiberal form of capitalism. It was allowed to develop like that because the U.S. needed it needed to ensure that South Korea looked better, or it looked like a capitalist, looked like a success story. But if you let South Korea just develop along a laissez-faire line, it would have remained a shithole. Let's just put it bluntly.
Here, I've got this image out. I think this sums up that idea of authoritarianism that you were talking about earlier, Xiangyu, right? This is a party cadre who is at a collective farm. In socialism, a person who doesn't work should not think he can eat, right? And a Westerner will see that and they'll think, oh, right, if you don't, they're forcing people to work, right? It's forced labor. That's not what he's saying, is he?
He's saying that people who are because there are gonna be disabled people who can't work, and that's not what he's talking about. It's because there are people like the elderly, the children, the disabled, the people who are like mentally unwell who can't work. It's because there are those people that people who are otherwise people who are able-bodied and able to work have the responsibility to work so that they can support those people. And if you are not and if you're not putting into society what you're taking out from it, then it's, I mean, especially a siege socialism, their resources are limited. Why should society be obligated to support you if you are able-bodied and you're able to do everything, and you're mentally well and you're not elderly and you're not like you have to put in society takes care of you, but you have to also take care of society. Exactly.
And here is you taking care of society, right? Look, everybody received approximately 1 ton of rice last year. He's talking about the yields that the families got that worked on this collective farm, regardless of, like you say, whether they were disabled or not. That's the food for the entire family, due to the work that they put in. When they're talking about work, they're talking about work in the same way that Stalin did during World War II, where it's war communism, isn't it? It's that siege mentality. Like you said earlier, the war has not finished. So the DPRK, at very least, has to attempt to keep up with the US, right? The US and the rest of the world by necessity. They have to. So they're going to have to do all they can to do that. Whether you think that's authoritarian or not, they don't have a society where somebody can decide to not work and live off the state or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And that's because of sanction.
Another point is there's some people, I don't know why, they'll be like, oh man, I just want to leave the US and go live in Korea because everything there is great. Well, to be honest, I think most people, especially like middle class kids who grew up in America, are not going to be able to like stand life in the DPRK for too long. And another thing is they're not obligated to take you in. I mean, the resources are limited enough as is. If you don't have anything to offer to them in terms of your skills and whatever, why should they have to take care of you? I mean, it's just these people don't understand how the world works. It might sound harsh, but they have to take care of themselves first.
Yeah, but that's like, if you're going to apply that rule to DPRK or Cuba or any quote-unquote socialist country, you hold capitalist societies that are third world in the same... You don't expect to go and move to a country in Africa that's capitalist, that's been raped by imperialism previously, to take you in, do you? It's not how it works. If you want... You have to stop the sanction, right? In your own country, and you have to make sure that your country becomes an ally of the people of DPRK, not an antagonist.
Yeah. Whereas countries like the U.S. are obligated, or should be morally obligated, to take in refugees from places like Honduras or now Afghanistan, because they're the ones who caused the destabilizations in other countries that give rise to these refugee crises.
I mean, as well, I think what you were saying, Xiangyu, as well, is this kind of idealism that I think it's probably the younger members of like the online left, and you know, they come into it and they think, they see us defending the DPRK and you know, not us particularly, but just people who uphold the DPRK, people who defend it. You know, we sit there and we're not gonna peddle the bad things about it, because enough people do that already. Enough people have, you know, enough horrible things to say about the DPRK. So we're not going to sit back in our spare time and say, well, yeah, the DPRK isn't great. it's not where you want to be living as a Western middle class kid. But I think they internalize the good things that we say about it, because we have to debunk the propaganda. And it's the same with China as well. I think people have this idealistic view of China. Oh, I want to go and live in a tier 3 city so I can get a true kind of understanding of China and all this. But you don't speak Chinese. You know, nobody in that city is going to be able to converse with you. You know, it's things like this. People have an idealistic view of these situations, I think, and sometimes they kind of mistake us defending these countries and dispelling the rumors and the lies which imperialists peddle about them, as us saying they're some kind of utopian paradise, which obviously they're not, because as you keep saying, they're still completely under siege in the most literal sense of the word. You know, no one wants to live under siege. The Koreans don't want to live under siege, so you don't want to be going, and you might not realize it, but you don't want to be going to live under these conditions.
You know what's funny?
It's really hard. Go on.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's very hard to live under these things, and it's funny because these like internet like edgy leftists and like reactionaries have one thing in common, which is they think that because we are debunking imperialist lies about the DPRK, that we're implying that it's like heaven on earth and it's utopian and there's like absolutely no problems with it. Also, can I just take the time to just shout out, like, I'm just looking at Artsy's painting and all. It's like, holy shit.
Amazing.
It's good, isn't it? It is looking good. I'll
if you're watching this and you have some money to spare, you should definitely support Artsy's artwork.
Thanks, comrade. I appreciate that.
I love it. This is going to sound really highbrow, right? But I love it when I check Twitter and see one of the paintings that she's painted on our show up for sale, and I see the price, and I'm like, I sat and watched that get made. Brilliant.
No, it's incredible.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I appreciate y'all support so much.
I feel like Kim Jong-un's sitting in the room with us.
Well, he is. He's right there. I don't know if it's coming up on the actual YouTube stream, but he's about to get painted in shortly anyway. So
You know, I brag about this a lot, but I've actually seen Kim Jong Un in person.
yeah, I saw your tweet. Right, it made me laugh because you were like, "I've been about 150 yards away."
It was more like
wait, well-
250.
There you go.
When was it? Was it during the mass games or something?
Yeah, you know that's why I don't have any pictures of the mass games because he was in
Oh, 'cause
attendance,
he
so
was
we weren't allowed
there.
to bring anything.
Okay.
But you know Zoe, one of the also a DPRK tour guide. She has an Instagram.
Yeah, I think so. I think he was talked
Okay.
about quite a bit. Yeah.
Hold on.
She was there-
Just
she was
just
there
hold
that
one
day.
second. Give the viewers a bit of context when you two keep saying this. You two went on the same tour company, right? So you know the same.
same.
Yes.
Yeah, same tour company, different times. I went
Yeah.
in 2019, summer of 2019.
Nice. Right.
I
Carry on,
went in
Xiangyu.
September 2018 and March 2019.
Nice. Carry on anyway.
But Zoe. Anyways, the day I saw Kim Jong Un, Zoe her Instagram handle was Zoe Discovers, ZoeDiscovers. She was actually in the stadium too, but her tour guide smuggled in her phone for her, so she actually has a picture of herself with
Nice.
Kim Jong Un in the background. I'm just like, I'm so fucking jealous. Like, why didn't I know you back then? So you could pass me the phone too, so I can take a selfie.
That would
Oh,
have
that's so cool.
that would have been good in the music video too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I booked that particular tour because I was like, okay, 70th anniversary of the founding of the DPRK. And there's also the mass games, and the mass games hadn't been held for 5 years, so that was the first opening of the. Oh yeah, National Day was also the opening of the mass games, and was the first in 5 years. I was like, there's no way Kim Jong Un would not be in attendance.
Yeah.
So then I told
we
my
were-
friends that.
Yeah, they were talking about it as well when we went to our one, that like just how exciting it was because he turned up and everything, and everyone expecting it but not expecting it, and I don't know. And even just to be honest, the mass games themselves, I don't know about you, but they were just incredible. Like, it was just an incredible feat of art. Like, it was coordinated and orchestrated like no other. Like, I don't know if the video will come up at some point, but you'll see like the flashing sort of cards, flashing images, mural in the background.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
played.
that's like,
It's shown up.
yeah, it's 17,000 high school students. They're about like 14, 15. And it's literally just them, like, it's sort of like a, I don't know, they have like, there's people at the bottom waving flags, and they just keep flipping these cards to make these incredible murals. And one of our guides used to do that as well back like a decade or so ago, and she was saying that you do sort of like 2 hours of training every day for about 4 months before your performance. And it's rigorous training because you have to be sort of like so well timed, and like it really is an art form. Like, you wouldn't think it just holding up like a colored piece of card, but the murals they were creating and the speed at which they were creating them as well, it was just incredible. Like, if anyone ever gets a chance to see the mass games, I would highly recommend.
Mhm.
There was also some Taekwondo influence when they do that, because they will like do like those like Taekwondo grunts, like when they when they're like doing the yeah.
Yeah. And they were all having like these competitions between all the districts of Pyongyang, which is really fun to watch as well. But it's just
According
people,
to Susan
you know...
Sontag, though. Sorry.
Pardon?
I said, according to Susan Sontag, though, one of the first like Baizuo supported by the CIA, these mass displays of art and athleticism, regardless of like the color of the flag, is automatically
Yeah.
fascism.
Oh my! Wow!
What?
Wow! Obviously.
Yeah. I can't remember. Oh yeah, there you go. But does that not prove, Xiangyu, that Westerners have a cult of personality over Kim? Like, you were all excited to see him, and the tour company never shut up about seeing him. It shows that the guy's like, I mean, Westerners do have even more of a fascination with him, and even more of a cult of personality on him, right? Hollywood make films about him, starring like stoners,
Very true.
going to the DPRK and hanging out with him, where they just
I was
throw
so
him.
excited.
What about that film?
And like, but my tour guide, I asked my younger tour guide, Miss Rowe, I was just like, so were you excited to see the Grand Marshal? And she was like, I see him on TV every day.
Yeah, no, because they literally just refer to him as comrade. Like, it's,
Uh-huh.
obviously there's a great amount of respect for him, but in conversation they will just refer to him as comrade, you know,
Or
just
the,
like
the
oh,
Grand Marshal.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think some of the tour guides from the Korean side get bored when foreigners get so excited.
There was this one Dutch girl in my tour group, and we were at the bar, and one of the bartenders speaks pretty good Chinese, so she wanted to converse with her, but like, you know, there was no mutual language that they shared, so I became the translator, and then she started asking a bunch of questions like Kim Jong Un, like, oh, does he speak English? And like the bartender was just like the fuck would I know? So then I just chimed in. I was like, well, there was that footage in Singapore when he was walking with Donald Trump along that path without any translators in sight, and it seemed like they were like at least able to converse on a certain level, on a conversational level.
I'm
So she thought-
1000% sure that Donald Trump can't speak Korean as well. Like, I would bet my life on that.
He might be fluent.
So I think Kim Jong Un's fluent in German, but English like conversation is like he has a certain it's working to a certain extent, probably better than my Korean, but the bartender thought for a second and she said, I'm just gonna imitate her Korean accent when speaking Chinese. I'll provide a translation afterwards. 我们敬爱的最高领导者金正恩同志什么都厉害.
Nice.
Which is our beloved, our respected supreme leader, comrade Kim Jong Un is good at everything.
It's very
No,
quick.
oh, that's a good point actually. I don't know if you experienced this as well, but whilst I was at our tour guides were very self-aware of just sort of like a lot of the propaganda, the rumors and stuff about them. So there'll just be like these running gags throughout the entire trip when they'd be like, you better not be late for the bus. If you're late, we're gonna punish you. We're not gonna tell you, but we're gonna take you somewhere and we're gonna punish you, okay? So don't be late. And they do just sort of like, they just point out random things, like if there was children marching in the street, like doing some extracurricular, they'd be like, oh look, our specially timed group of children have just arrived. Be sure to watch out for them and film them for your Western audiences. So they would make so many sort of like off the cuff sort of jokes like that. And then it would really sort of jar the people on the tour group because they'd be like, wait, are they being serious? Are they being serious? Are they not? Wait, what's going on?
Wait, I thought there was only
My bus
15
driver-
approved haircuts.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This one time I was hanging out with a bus driver. The bus driver of our group doesn't speak English or Chinese. He was just like, you know, he seemed like one of those guys who he seemed like a very army type guy. He completed his military service and he was just like, you know, normal, like kind of go through the stuff, his obligations in life, you know, go through the military and whatever. He's just chill, not really concerned with too many things like some other people might be like not too concerned about like what's going on in the outside world. He's just living his own life. But we would just make conversation, and then he asked me if I like where I'm from, like where my family's from, if I've ever like been to South Korea and whatever. And then I talked. I was like, yeah, the alcohol in the north is a lot better than the alcohol in the south, but I'd say the tobacco in the south is a little bit better than the stuff in the north. and he was just like, no. Our tobacco is the best. South Korean tobacco ain't shit. But then the next day he was smoking a pack of South Korean cigarettes. So then
I love that.
I was giving him shit about that, and then I told him, I told the tour guide, like we were just like kind of joking around, and he was like, and the tour guide was like, our bus driver is a spy.
I have a question that I see banded around quite a bit that you can try and answer. What do you say to people who be like, North Korea, DPRK isn't socialist, they've abandoned class struggle? What does anybody say to that claim that you see banded around by quote unquote leftists?
I mean, you have people from like from China who like lived during like the Mao era who go there and say that like a lot of what's going on there reminds them of like the collectivist spirit of their childhood, like that era. I mean, I don't know, what do these people want?
This is what I think.
Socialism, build it in your own country. Let them
Exactly.
do their
Build a
own thing.
better version of North Korean socialism and go, there you go, guys, look, now you can
there are North Korean cadre who in private will say that they don't believe China is socialist, but then they don't go around they don't go around like online arguing with people online. It's just their own personal opinion. You know, if that's what you want to believe, fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, exactly.
But at the very least, they don't have a country doesn't have to be socialist for you to support their sovereignty and their independence. Even if a country is feudal, I would still defend them against U.S. imperialism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People have the right to self-determination, food security, monetary sovereignty. You know, don't they? That's a basic right. That's decolonialism. Xiangyu, then Tom. Xiangyu, Harrison, then Tom. Sorry, Tom, you've spoken.
I already answered.
Oh, go on then, Harrison.
And I was just going to say as well, what about how the same type of people will say it's a neo-colony of China?
Oh my god.
A similar type of argument.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, stupid. And also, just about you saying that they tell those jokes, and yeah, about kind of the little military children or whatever. It's weird because I saw an article that they banned sarcasm. So, yeah, that's interesting to see. Yeah, apparently they banned sarcasm.
Ban sarcasm, and if you don't, you get one of 15 haircuts.
Oh my god, imagine. Oh, I've sorry, did anyone else want to say anything for it?
No, go on.
I was just gonna say,
Oh.
I think it's. Sorry. I was gonna say, I think it's interesting, isn't it, when you see these? It's mostly Americans or Western Europeans that you see saying these kind of things. And you'll see them come out and say like, oh, you know, this isn't real socialism or whatever from their bastion of capitalism that they live in, as though they have a say in the matter. But I've also seen people like on this kind of ultra left, quote unquote, side of things, saying that if China and the USA were to come to war, they wouldn't support either side because it would be an inter-imperialist conflict. And I just think to myself, how can you even utter a sentence like that? And unfortunately, that's not something I've just seen once. I've seen that from multiple larger of these kind of like ultra left accounts.
Here's the thing.
Go on.
If one day, for whatever reason, China and the US were fighting for control over, I don't know, like India,
resources,
like just fighting over for, like, actual domination of India, then yeah, of course I would not support either side. But that's not, if a war were to break out between the two countries, I doubt that would be the context. I mean, look at who has who surrounded by a bunch of military bases
and nuclear weapons.
Exactly. I mean, the US is building a military a missile chain across all the islands in across the South China Sea. I think that it's costing them about 28.4 billion, something ridiculous like that. So the US have literally got China surrounded at this point in time. So to compare them as aggressors is, you know, it's a bit rich. And again, with the claims of, you know, oh, the DPRK isn't socialist or socialist enough, as everyone here has already reiterated, like, what is any Westerner living in the imperial core to say about the affairs of a country they've never been to, they don't, to be honest, know the politics of, and they probably never will. Like, it's just none of their business, really.
I think Westerners, right, before you carry on, I think Westerners think that they have the automatic right to openly, publicly criticise these bad things about a place, just because certain socialists are like, yeah, you should criticise stuff. But that, to me, I understand that sort of idea as, if I was to meet with the Korean Workers' Party and sit down and talk to them in private, I can lay my criticisms upon them to them, and I can listen to the answers they give back. But I think Tom mentioned it when he's like, why don't you ever say anything bad? I'm not gonna be openly critical. Exactly, I'm not gonna be openly critical to help sanctions exist. If you want me to publicly criticize DPRK, end the sanctions on DPRK, and I'll criticize those aspects that need criticizing, right? I mean, everybody who is a socialist criticizes the 996 phenomenon in China, right? It does exist. Carry on what you were saying, Fiona.
No, I was just gonna say, it's just sort of like, well, I mean, how the DPRK has survived sort of like decades of imperialist siege and aggression and sanction should tell you enough about the road that it's taking. So regardless of whether you personally believe it's socialism or not, they are clearly on the path that is correct and right for them. So what's the point of interfering? You have no inside knowledge. Like, you have to trust that the Korean people are not only self-determining, but they know exactly what they're doing. They have studied Marxism, Leninism. They've studied, socialism. They've studied sort of like Juche, and they're creating their own ideologies, their own pathways in their revolution. And if we can't trust them with that, it's just sort of like, but why do we have any chauvinism? Why do we have any authority over it? And it was quite interesting because the guides that I was speaking to, we were just having a conversation about revolution and revolutionaries and like, what do they think a revolutionary is? And I asked them, like, do you think you're revolutionary? And both of them, they were just like, no, we don't think we are revolutionaries, but it's something that we strive to be. We want to be better socialists. We want to be better at supporting and fighting for our country, but we have a lot of work to put in. And they were very honest about that. So even in sort of like just basic everyday conversations, it's there's no point valorizing sort of like Korean communists as this utopian force who know exactly what they're doing all the time and they're going to get everything right all the time. They're literally struggling just like us. They're taking part in class struggle, in sort of like in fighting imperialists, just like we are, or we should be doing an imperial core, but they just have it under different material conditions and different contexts. So again, this is for them to decide. This is a path they should be taking within their own forms of direct democracy, and nothing we do or say in the West will improve their conditions, like apart from ending imperialism. That's the only thing we can do.
Here's a good way to look at exactly what you were just saying, right? Imagine, I've just seen you search those articles up. I was researching for the show, all those like weird facts about North Korea. Literally put it in Google, you'll get some absolutely ridiculous results. There's one that said North Koreans are convinced that Korea is a single country. Do you know what I mean? Like, compare that. You would not see a liberal paper to this day and age print Palestinians are convinced that Palestine is a single country. They won't print that, right, these day and age, because decolonization or whatever has been co-opted by certain liberals, hasn't it?
It has become a buzzword.
Liberals, but
neither.
pro-war think tank, the kind of people who the Democrats support wanting build to more wars and more, and not just Democrats, but Republicans too. But I've seen this kind of coming from all shades of American institutions, whether they are left and blue. So we definitely careful of rhetoric that they're spewing, because at this time, we're in a really dangerous conjunction point.
They're not going to print. They're not going to print. Irish people are convinced that Ireland is a single country. They're not going to print that, because it's become acceptable, hasn't it? That it's like a stalemate war. It's exactly the same.
The DPRK should like fight fire with fire and start like printing tabloid headlines like "Westerners are convinced that Korea is two separate countries."
But Xiangyu, you tweet a lot about this as well. The South considers there to be only one Korea as well, right? So does the USA.
Here's the thing. The South, the puppet regime in the South, they call themselves the Republic of Korea, right? If you look at their constitutional map, or if you go to South Korea and you buy a map, it's labeled the Republic of Korea and it shows the entire peninsula, and the DMZ is like a dotted line. So it's like they acknowledge the political reality that Korea is partitioned, but they don't see it as two countries, at least officially. Now, maybe some people might casually, especially nowadays, a lot of the youth in the South don't really care as much about reunification as their northern brothers and sisters. But I mean, you go to the north and like you get a map that says the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and it also shows the entire country with like the DMZ as a dotted line. And neither government has given up claims of like the other side, the territory that's not under their direct control. And it's perfectly valid, because I mean, Korea wasn't divided by themselves. It was and in fact, if you check out I'm currently working on a series on Carl Zaw's podcast, the Korean War series, and the episode I just finished recording was about how the so-called Republic of Korea regime was established in the South. It was done against the will of the people. A lot of just a lot of maneuvering by the U.S. because they knew if left to their own accord, a single government that was more pro-socialist, pro-Soviet, and not pro-imperialist would have been formed. So they had to just kind of put Syngman Rhee in power and just kind of create a separate regime first in the South, and then they wanted to reunify the Korean Peninsula under that regime.
Mm-hmm. And if the South was to not claim all of Korea, it would give the US no excuse to really be there, right? At all as well. We've got to keep the war going. If the South says we're separate countries now, the war has to stop, surely. So it's such a double standard to do that.
Mm-hmm. It's just kind of weird in the South because you're so influenced by the U.S. Like sometimes you have southern news outlets like Arirang News, like in their English podcasts. In their English podcasts, they will use terminology like the two Koreas, but in the North they don't do that. In the North, it's our country, and then if they're speaking specifically, like they'll use terms like North Korea and South Korea, but not like with the understanding that they're two countries. They're just two parts of the same country. And then when they write out North Korea and South Korea, North and South are lowercase just to further emphasize the fact that Korea is one. And that's the way I prefer to write things on my Twitter.
Okay, that makes sense. So what does anybody think about the idea that when you talk about Korean unification with people, they say things like, "Ooh, well that means that like Southerners are going to have to." Are they going to submit to like authoritarian socialism? Well, they're not, are they? Because the point of that is that sanctions would be lifted, right? So they won't have to do the collective struggle side of existing, to the degree that they're having to do it right now. And the North would quickly improve to the standard that the South is already in, infrastructure and society-wise, right? You would just be removing capitalism and switching it to socialism.
Well, realistically, reunification is not going to happen like that. It's probably going to be a one country, two system sort of arrangement.
Yeah, but
at least for an interim period.
Exactly, but
how does that?
Hold on, exactly. Sorry? But the idea that socialism is inevitable, right? Because it's the next stage of human progression. As long as socialism exists in the world, and we have big countries like China that are socialist that can exert pressure on imperial powers, it makes socialism for the rest of the world more inevitable, doesn't it? And I mean, I don't want to sound like a leftcom or whatever, but that is Marxism, isn't it? Marx says that we're going to transition from basic communism, which is cavemen, to communal, to feudalism, to capitalism, to socialism, through socialism to communism, advanced communism. That's luxury space communism, isn't it, that people talk about? It's that idea.
Luxury gay space communism.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it? So as long as Korea unites under... I mean, I think this is why China's quite hands-off with Hong Kong, because they know as long as they stay socialist and have the side of the people, they will win out, because they just have to hold out.
I saw a hilarious headline today, which was a load of the BNO Hong Kongers, the ones who'd fled to Britain after the national security law came in. They've all gone home. Like a significant number of them have returned back to Hong Kong, and there's like a big shortage in school places for all of these returning Hong Kongers.
I have a joke about that.
Go on.
So BNO, like how like a lot of times they act like they're like a class above other Hong Kongers. I feel like in Hong Kong they might be going around. I've never heard people say this before, but I pulled it out of my ass. They go around saying, "I am British, not Oriental lah." But then BNO, British not Oriental. But then I bet like they'll go to like the UK and they'll say the same shit and they'll just be like, "You fucking chink."
No, 110%.
Exactly.
Like I've just seen a lot of things in London about news articles about how we need to accept these Hong Kong citizens, not isolate them from society. And it's just like, it's so, even just the way that the government has done this whole quote unquote resettlement process is, you can see how racist and colonial driven it is, because you've got the Windrush generation, and there's been literal mass deportations of people who have lived in Britain for like decades and decades, like who have family here.
Yeah.
And they've all been deported to sort of like Jamaica and areas of the Caribbean. But then you've got all these Hong Kong citizens who are under this resettlement scheme being welcomed with open arms, and you can just see the juxtaposition in how different classes of people are treated.
That's
but
because
even
they
then,
have
like,
pockets full
Exactly.
of cash.
yeah.
Carry on.
Exactly.
Hold on, let Fiona finish.
Oh no, that was more or less it. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, sorry. It's kind of like how you have in America sometimes they'll portray like Cuban Americans and like Mexicans and like Guatemalans, like Salvadorians, as just all just Latin, just collectively. But like I've worked in restaurant kitchens, and like I've worked with Mexicans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, etc. And they fucking hate Cuban Americans. I mean, it's a generalization, but I mean, obviously, I'm not encouraging like people to just go assume like everybody who's like of a Cuban background in the U.S.
No, but it makes sense, right? Europeans hate each other as well, but it's like it's like a brotherly hate, right?
Well, this Mexican guy I worked with was like, where these Cubans in America, they get their green cards because the U.S. is anti-Castro, and then they forget that they're Latinos, and they look down on the rest of us.
Isn't
Exactly.
like Scarface about that exact thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
was
exactly
another one.
the same with Hong Kongers.
There was another one with Hong Kongers from this week, and it was some woman she'd gone over to Britain for a lovely, wonderful life under the capitalist state, and found that she could only get a job as working in a fish and chip restaurant. It's like a Chinese fish and chip restaurant, and basically the owner of this restaurant had given her a trial shift, right? And in Britain, most of the time, they don't pay people for trial shifts. Essentially, it's free labor, essentially. So she turned up, she did her 4-hour trial shift. She went back the next day, and the boss was like, no, we don't need you, fuck off, kind of thing. So then she staged a protest outside the fish and chip shop, like a one-woman protest, protesting for her wages. And like, this is just the kind of, it's hilarious because in Hong Kong, she's being told her whole life, Britain's this shining beacon on the hill. You don't want to live under the evil communist regime on the mainland. You'll be so much poorer and all this. And then she actually goes over to Britain, realizes what it's actually like. It's actually a significant step down from her livelihood in Hong Kong. And then she has to start staging like fucking one-woman protests to try and get her 4-hour wages. Now that's not good, because I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying that it's just eye-opening, isn't it? It's good when people have their eyes opened like that, and I think that is what we're seeing with a lot of these BNOers going home back to Hong Kong when they realise that it isn't all the grass.
Well,
isn't
it
always
shows that capitalism doesn't have their side just because they have the side of capitalism. I mean, it shows the fact it's literally like proving Engels and Marx right, isn't it? That capitalism will chew up and spit out people who support capitalism, who even are capitalists. Smaller capitalists get chewed up, don't they, by bigger capitalists? That's how Jeff Bezos makes his millions, by exploiting smaller capitalists who sell their goods on Amazon, right? So that's what this sort of thing proves, doesn't it? It proves that capitalism doesn't give a fuck whether you support it or not. You can.
That's why the anti-protest Hong Kongers call those protesters condoms. The imperialists will use them once and then throw them away.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, I mean, that's what all they are. They're just. I mean, Hong Kong Chinese. At the end of the day, they're just the people that the British colonized. That's all they are. They're just poor, and it's like they don't. If there's, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of Hong Kongers are still under this impression that the British care for them in any way, shape, or form.
The ones who actually live in the British world don't really have that sort of they don't have those sort of illusions. They tend to not have those sorts of illusions, especially the working class ones. But you have people like Joshua Wong. When was he born? He was born like what, like 90s? He has no living memory of life under British rule.
No, exactly.
And he really, and he posted a quote in the movie.
Vito, hold your mic a bit closer. You're breaking up a bit.
All right. So
that's perfect.
Church did a lot of like horrible, like awesome stuff that no one in the state, like not a lot of people new in the state that have done, like the famine in India and Bengal. Also, he is actually the first, like in the like late 90s century. He's the guy who denigrated Afghanistan, like the pre-reform Afghanistan before it was like actually just oh no, I'm breaking away from the DPRK conversation. Like this is like one of those things where Joshua Wong facing a guy who put a lot of people in the Southeast Asian countries in a really bad state, and no idea. I think because it was the Hong Kong in the 2000s was still developing its own political projects, and there are a lot of people who admittedly wanted to reunify with after 2047, and this is why people like Jimmy Lai are so powerful, is the media is their Western tools, and with the backing of American, like the Council on Foreign Relations, which the media publication Wall Street Journal.
You're breaking up again, Vito.
Sorry.
I am going to say one thing though, right? You said that you're breaking away from the DPRK a little bit. I think you're not though, because I think the reunification of Hong Kong, the decolonization of Hong Kong peacefully, is something to compare with the reunification of Korea. The battles that they're going to have to fight along the way are probably going to be similar to the ones that China's faced in Hong Kong, which is not letting go without a subversive battle of wills along the way, right? They're doing it in Afghanistan now, aren't they? They're struggling to leave. We can't get out quick enough. Just get the fuck out and go home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even in the south, I don't know if you saw about there's that whole clause on the DMZ line where they're not, where neither side is supposed to drop propaganda on the other side, but the south have been violating it by dropping sort of like all sorts of propaganda leaflets and stuff like that, and basically violating that whole treaty. So there have actually been like a load of protests up in the north, but predominantly led by students associations, sort of like in protest of the south.
And rightly so.
There was a case a couple of years ago where the south side of the DMZ they put up like a huge propaganda speaker and used it to blast K-pop across the border.
Generation.
And it got shot down by by snipers in the north. Like there was on the north side of the border, they just like shot the speaker down. That was so funny.
There's another one, isn't there, that I saw? Well, this again. We're going to finish on this one, right? Everybody can say one last thing after I've said this, but I saw another one like that, and it was that there was like, North Korea has a fake village in the DMZ that they maintain to like look like everybody's fake. No, that's not what's happening. It's the fact that the DMZ cut this village in half 50 years ago. So it's been maintained in the hope that, and symbolically, that people will return to live there one day. It's got nothing to do with them trying to look like life's good to Americans. They don't give a shit about that. It's maintained because people used to live in that village, right? And it's possibly one of the only villages that remains after the bombing campaign because of its location. So it's kept, to be returned to one day because that village is somebody's home, right? We discussed this before the start of the show. A lot of Westerners seem to think that life has always been this way and it's not just like a quick thing. The privileges and luxuries that we have in the West, we've only just got in terms of the grand scale of things. It was yesterday, right? And these other countries around the world are just catching up. And placing sanctions on them is just not right. It doesn't matter whether, like Xiangyu said earlier, it doesn't matter whether they're socialist or not. If you are meddling with their right to exist through sanction or otherwise, it's wrong, and the people of the world should be, fighting together to stop that. We're a collective world now, whether we like it or not. We can communicate with each other. People talk about climate change. It's these are the things that need solving, right? It's these things that will solve climate change. Stopping the world's need to have military polluting the environment, etc. Stopping the need to have this crazy production chain where the West's appetite for meat is destroying the ocean, all these battles are linked. And they're linked by imperialism, right? I'm going to go down the list in alphabetical how they are on Discord and just say one last thing and plug yourself. So Artsy, right? Before you come on, we're gonna, if you're a Patreon, we're gonna switch to the fan room and hang out with Patrons, and you possibly be able to see Artsy finish up in that room if you're a Patreon. So join us down there after the show. But Artsy, one last thing you want to say?
Yeah, you can also support what I do at I like painting supplies and stuff, and prints of this one will be for sale on my website, artsymarxist.com, later tonight, hopefully. So yeah, thank you.
Nice. Are the prints going to be sold just in the US, or can you send them all over the world?
No, I ship internationally, so just the shipping will be getting out of your location.
Nice. So there you go. Look out for that. Right. Who's next on the Patreon list? We have Fiona. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on again. I've really enjoyed just being able to chat through all this garbage and make these connections with you. So as I think it's on the title, my Twitter it's on private, but anyone can follow me. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to keep an eye out for all the imperialist lies about the DPRK, because as we've discussed here, a lot of them are grounded in truth. It's just a case of trying to discover what that truth and what that baseline is. But yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And welcome back anytime, right? Just be like, oi, let me come on the show.
100%.
Nice. Are you going to stay about for a little chat with the patrons? Just stay for a bit.
Yeah, of course.
Tom.
Yeah, I'm still It's Mausina on Twitter. If anyone hasn't followed me yet, you're making a terrible mistake. And obviously, all I've got to say to add on to this is, if you are from the West, like me and Fran and Harrison in the chat are today, then you just need to shut the fuck up. If you haven't got anything nice to say about a socialist country or a feudalist country, any country that is not your own, shut the fuck up. Is what I have to advise you, and uphold Great Marshal Kim Jong-un.
Here.
Nice. Vito, you just joined in like normal. You never get an introduction because I never see you show up. You just join up. But thanks, Vito. You're in Hong Kong, right? It's like 6 a.m. or something.
It's it's pretty much in the morning. It's almost 7, but I'm actually just try to like a lot of whether or not is definitely a more flexible timeline to do a lot of these podcasts. Because, yeah, it's been really productive.
Nice. Well, Vito, you're breaking up again. We need to get this internet sorted, don't we?
Yeah.
It's just breaking. But that's the fallacy of talking halfway across the world, isn't it? It's breaking up. Vito, always a pleasure for you to join us. Anyway, right? You always just show up. It's the habit. Harrison, say something. Promote the TikTok as well while you're doing it.
Oh yeah, follow us on TikTok. I think Fran hasn't added. Oh, there it is, the QR code. Yeah, if you want to scan that. I basically just upload videos to try and wind up Americans. So if you want to join me in the comments, it'd be very much appreciated. But yeah, thanks to the guests for coming on. It's been, I've learnt a lot. Really enjoyed it. And have a good night. That was the worst outro ever, sorry, but...
No, it's alright, that was brilliant. The music bot can't speak, so Xiangyu, anything you want to add?
You can, if you haven't already, you can feel free to follow me on Twitter. My handle is not Xiangyu, so NOTXIANGYU. And if you go on the link in the bio, it has like all of my links to like my other things, like my YouTube channel, my Spotify, my anything you might want to find. And I'm currently working on my next album. Don't know when it's going to be completed, but what I can promise is it'll be better than anything I've released so far. What I have now is already better than everything I have so far, so look out for that. And
Nice.
Thanks for having me on.
When you exactly, you're welcome back anytime as well. Just demand to come on. Send us that link when you get that out and we'll do a retweet for you. Right, I have to do all our stuff now. Right, we got merch at this link. If you want it, just say on a DM to us, give me the merch link, and you can go on there and you can buy all this tat. If you're not a merch type of person, I mean, all these... Oh, we've got Artsy's Patreon up from the last show. We've got a Patreon as well. Go to @MangoPress for ours. Join all of our patrons. Xiangyu, do you bother with Patreon?
I don't, because I feel like I don't push material out regularly enough to justify a Patreon, because I do sell my CDs. But I did set up a Coffee, but I haven't really posted links to that yet.
All right, well,
because Coffee is not like a subscription, so it's like people can just tip whenever. I feel like that's a little bit more justifiable, but I'm still like kind of like thinking, should I put it out? Because like if I put it out, people donate through that, then maybe they won't feel like buying a CD. And I feel like if I receive money from somebody, I should be giving something physical in return, just because of what I do. I'm not saying other people should as well, but just because of what I do, I feel like that's...
I mean, I get what you're saying. I hate doing this part of the show. It's the worst part of the entire show, right? If you want to join us in the Hangout, if you're a patron, you can get into the Discord server and you can come in to like hang out with us and Xiangyu and Fiona and Artsy Marxist on Discord for a bit after the show. Right, what else have I got? Sammy's back. Next podcast, apparently. Sammy's back. Don't forget, hit us up on the web, mango-press.com. There's stuff in the works. We're trying to get back on schedule with the articles coming out. Anyway, right, you guys in the chat, I'm going to move you down to the other channel while this music plays out so you don't ruin the outro. See you later, guys.
So rude.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you in a bit.